Hey guys, Kyle here. So, just before the show starts, I wanted to mention our Patreon. You can pay us $1 a month as a thank you, as a tip. You can pay $2 a month to get access to one of our bonus content shows, episodes 2 days early, and a secret Discord chat where all of our Patreon donors get to go and hang out and talk with us directly. Then there's a $5 tier that you can donate to get access to a whole bunch more content. We have multiple bonus episodes on there. So please check it out. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We don't advertise, we don't make money. So check it out and throw some money if you think that would be cool. Thanks. Welcome to It Gets Weird, our comedy show where we explore the unusual, the unbelievable, and the unexplained to try and make your world a little weirder. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Niall.
And I'm going to try and take care of the opening bit for Niall, because Niall's a little frazzled. He's got a lot going on. So the opening bit, let's see, what's funny?
Let's talk about, have you had any experiences driving lately?
I wasn't thinking about bringing back the Kyle's driving corner, but I was going to do a really bad, airline food type thing, just kind of fill the air with
what's your favorite? What's your drive food of choice?
Driving,
just to bring those two things together.
So on the road.
If you're on a road trip, what do you like while driving? What is the thing that you eat?
Interesting. When I was really young, it was corn nuts.
Interesting. Okay.
But as an adult, it's usually like cashews or peanuts. But if I'm really feeling extra funny, I like gummy worms.
I do like a gummy. Gummies are
good
because it keeps your mouth engaged.
You're chewing.
And
you got a bunch of different tastes.
And you can have one stick out of your mouth a little bit and turn to the person you're driving with and go, oh,
you can make a funny face with it, or you can slurp it up like a noodle and be like that.
They're really one of the most wow. Variety. They do. You can do a lot of things.
You can do a lot of things. They're versatile, I think is the word you're looking for. And I like gummy bears just because I like gummies, but there's not as much you can do while you're driving, right? Like a gummy, like a worm, you can, like I said, you can slurp it up. You don't need your hands for that. With a bear, if you want to do funny bits with them, like bite their heads off or bite them in half and attach them together, And
if you start trying to pop, throw them up and catch them in your mouth, you're going to drive off the road.
Yeah. So there's a lot more hand action that has to happen with a gummy bear than with a gummy worm, at least if you're trying to do bits. I guess it kind of all evens out if you're not a child about eating your gummies while you're driving.
Yeah.
But I am.
Yeah.
So that has been the opening bit of this episode. I'm gonna start declaring bits.
We'll start doing segments for the first time in the entirety of the show.
Yes.
We're gonna have delineated segments that aren't the big question.
Yeah. No, this week, Niall, I must have bust into this apartment like fucking.
You were Cosmo Kramer.
Yeah, or like Charlie Day in the episode where he works the office job and It's Always Sunny and thinks that there's a conspiracy.
Yeah.
I probably seemed a little crazed.
Wait, the energy between the two of us when you first walked into my apartment was like two people that were I don't even know. It's like both of us were slamming Red Bull all day. We were fucking.
Well, you're frazzled and I'm kind of bouncing off the walls.
Yeah.
So really, I think that kind of makes you the straight man here, right?
Sure,
you're my sort of straight man in this scenario. Because this week, I'll just reuse the phrase I told you. I saw what I thought was a pretty deep puddle, and I stepped into it, and it turned out it was a lake,
which says a lot about your eyesight. But it's
yes, I actually do need to get my eyes checked. Driving is starting to get worse for me as I get old as dirt. Some
young dirt.
It is definitely more a comment on my eyesight, but also just my judgment of puddles in general.
Yeah.
Or bodies of water, maybe. This is maybe the deepest rabbit hole I've personally ever gone down. And we've been doing this show for over 6 years.
Yeah.
It's also, I think, quickly becoming my favorite subject.
Interesting. Okay.
That I know, I absolutely know that as time goes on, I'm going to revisit this many times because I have to. And it's because I actually was researching one particular subject, one particular guy, in fact.
You got one guide?
This is the one guy to massive grand conspiracy pipeline that we experience so much at this show.
Yeah.
This, Niall, is my attempt to lay the groundwork for the United States involvement, the government's involvement in UFO disinformation.
Okay, actually, that's very interesting because I have. This is a thing that I've looked at quite a bit, not like in depth, but like because I keep coming across a lot of UFO stuff, and I go into like the full whack job, like you know, secret space program and all this kind of shit. And the thing that comes up a lot in the stuff I look at is, those ideas are basically put out there so that like to basically make it so that they get lumped in with the more believable stuff.
Yeah.
So that it all gets swept under a misinformation blanket of just like, these are all lunatics. So you can't trust any of it.
This is hard to research by design.
Yeah.
And I will also say
go
that
on DuckDuckGo for this shit.
Yeah, I was on all kinds of search engines. Did you
ask Jeeves?
I asked Jeeves on this one because Jeeves is holding some of the secret relics of internet's past.
What was it? Dogpile. Did you go on Dogpile?
Oh my God, I forgot about Dogpile. And I don't even think Ask Jeeves is around. I don't think it exists.
Didn't they just like cut it to like Ask and then it got turned into something else?
But I don't think that exists at all anymore. I think it's just gone. But I honestly don't know. But I did go down. I don't know how many tabs I had open for this one and how many bookmarks I made. But I got to this subject. It was another one of those deals where I was looking into. You will recognize the name, but you may not remember where it comes from.
Probably his parents.
What?
I said probably their parents.
Yes, it could be. Well, so I was reading about one little guy named Paul Benowitz.
Yes.
And you're going to lose it when we start talking about Paul Benowitz, but that's not happening in this, by the way, part 1 episode.
Is he in one of the people that got like murdered? UFO journalist, maybe?
Kind of.
Okay. I'm just trying to think of where I know the name, but I'll let you sow your seeds and make your crops.
You're gonna love the way you look. First of all,
I guarantee it.
I guarantee it. But no, it's I started researching Paul Benowitz, which is like I think going to be actually the end of this series of episodes, however many we end up doing.
Yeah.
And
it's always nice when you get on one of these tears because then like
you can take a break.
Yeah, I don't have to do research for like 2 or 3 weeks.
A couple weeks. Yeah. We get definitely. I just go into a manic mode where I'm like spending a week just like deep in these stories.
Yeah.
And I actually think I mentioned to you a lot of my information is coming from a lot of different places here, but I did have to watch a documentary that we were maybe saving up for the show, but we could still watch it for the show. But regardless, even if we don't watch this documentary for the show, I think you should watch it with me sometime. It is Mirage Men, which is about Paul Benowitz and UFO disinfo, and another guy who I did a lot of looking into for this named Richard Doty. And again, this is just a tease for the UFO history knowers out there who like, not that you don't, it's just these are names that have come up for you and we have not investigated super deep into yet. And also, I went back and listened to 5 different episodes of this podcast to see how we discussed the related issues.
Probably with a lot of grace and aplomb, right?
Well, what I think is extremely funny about Paul Benowitz is that I think that we maybe conclude somewhat hesitantly that Paul Benowitz may not have existed, but he does. He did.
Okay.
Sorry. Let me get into this because we have a long way to go before we actually talk Paul Benowitz and Richard Doty. Because there is sort of a groundwork that comes from the actual book Mirage Men. That is sort of explaining. It is an attempt to explain. Okay, let me put it this way. Usually, the disinfo explanation for these events come in these two camps in ufology, at least as I've read about it. One camp is either looking to basically prove that there is not only a terrestrial explanation for UFO phenomena, but also that there is some intentionality in the interpretation by the public of that phenomena as being an alien UFO.
Okay.
Usually this side of the theories, usually they're sort of positing that the government is intentionally muddying the waters for a number of different reasons, such as covering up top secret or experimental technology. But then the other camp of in this discussion kind of sees the UFO disinfo as a play against the public's attempt to gain access to the truth of extraterrestrial visitation to planet Earth. So those are kind of the two people that I've found researching this. But for this episode, we're going to mostly talk about the former because the story of UFO disinfo within the United States government for the purpose of secrecy and cover-up of projects and tech is deeply tied to Benowitz and Doty. And that is kind of the framework of Mirage Men. So that's kind of the side that I got of this story.
Okay.
So the way this all kind of begins is by hitting touchstones in the history of UFOs in the United States and talking about things that difficult to verify because I don't actually have the book. And two, I had not heard before. We've covered these things and I had not heard these little tidbits that then play into a more, I guess you could say, rational explanation of the UFO phenomena. But maybe that, I don't know. You see what I'm saying, I think though, so. Right?
Yeah, you're we do tend to look for the ridiculous because it's more fun,
right?
And sometimes that means not accentuating the that Mothman might have been a heron,
right,
right. That stuff is less fun, so it happens.
I think this stuff is extremely fascinating, but definitely not as nuts as some of the other stuff that if you cover some of these things at face value. But it's also nuts in its own honestly sinister way. So yeah, a lot of this info is going to be the secondhand account that I had to kind of pick up from other places talking about the book Mirage Men, and I watched the documentary. This is by Mark Pilkington, by the way, is the name of the guy who wrote the book.
Okay.
So we're gonna start.
What's the guy? What's the idiot abroad guy's name?
Carl Pilkington.
Carl Pilkington. Okay.
That is who popped into my brain when I first saw the name.
And I've been holding back from starting to make some fucking Mike Doty references. Who did he was what was this fucking band? Black Helicopters.
Black Helicopters. I mean, that's
what is that band name?
I don't know. You're gonna have to give me more.
Not Shudder to Think. It was like a 90s alt rock.
Mike Doty. Should I know this?
You know his band.
Okay. Well, you let me know when you get to that fact from your Google search, because I'm gonna keep going and you just tell me when you find out.
Soul Coughing. Jesus.
Okay. Thank you.
Look, I need to stop trying to make niche polls when my brain is absolutely fried.
That's okay. Let me gently hold your hand and walk you through this one, and you can. Yeah. And I think what your fried sort of brain state is going to be good for is just jumping in and just adding to the comedy, because I'm not going to say a lot of very funny things.
Look, I'm going to do my best.
Thank
let's
you.
go ahead and I'll stop distracting you by name dropping 90s guitarists.
That's all good. I appreciate it. Somebody out there appreciates the 90s indie rock guitarist poll. Yeah.
I'll see if I can get some Morphine references in here.
Cool. That would be awesome. So Niall, let's start with Kenneth Arnold.
Yeah.
The Kenneth Arnold story.
I do not remember all the details, but I am acquainted with Kenneth Arnold.
Kenneth Arnold was another two-parter by me. And honestly, I feel when people talk to me about my work on this show,
Mhm.
I feel pretty proud of the Kenneth Arnold coverage. I feel like I feel that's one of those episodes that I think like, oh, I did a pretty good job on that one.
Yeah.
So just patting myself on the back real quick. But also, a lot of the genesis for this episode is I kept getting asked by family members, why is the United States government putting out reports and things and saying that UFOs exist? And I always tell them it's not for a good reason. And also it's not about aliens and it's not this or that.
Yeah.
But I didn't have like a good answer as to why.
Fair. So. Yeah. You just had your best guesses because like, it's funny how we started this podcast as like, oh, we're going to joke around and make these, just kind of make like it started out as more of a comedy podcast. And then we both just like got so like in it.
Yeah, it's hard not to get sucked in.
Yeah, because it's really interesting. There's so much of this shit out there, and it's like, I have a fascination, and so do you. And it sometimes means that we just get really caught up in this stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, Kenneth Arnold. You'll recall Arnold as being the man who really kicked off the UFO craze in the United States, June of 1947. This would actually be about 2 weeks, actually maybe 2 weeks exactly before Roswell. And Arnold would describe an encounter with these like convex shaped objects in flight. And his descriptions would end up getting reported in the media, or I guess misconstrued, at least according to him, as being, quote, flying saucers. And that's where the term flying saucer is coined.
Right.
That's the modern conception of the UFO. Like I said, we did a whole 2-part series on Arnold. I think it was episode like 250 something. Maybe it is episode just 250 and 251. So if you want an in-depth story on him, check that out. Yeah. So once Arnold had become a permanent fixture in the freshly established UFO canon, which was not as wildly popular as it would be later, but 1947 is like the quote-unquote UFO flap or the summer of saucers. Because there's all this stuff going down and these reports coming in. But he ends up doing his own research and investigating of UFO cases. Within the UFO disinfo conspiracy canon, we have some alternate theories about how some of these events went down. Or I guess not. I mean, they're alternate theories, but they're extra tidbits that I somehow missed.
Okay.
That make things look a little stranger. These theories tend to be pointing to the government, the United States government, fucking with UFO events basically from the very beginning.
Interesting. Okay.
So,
because like I know that Roswell and stuff, there are people that believe. I think there's a whole theory about it being actually being like a Russian thing that came across that crashed in the US, and to keep it like top secret they like kind of started pushing the UFO narrative to like make it not seem like Russia had that advanced technology that was able to get into New Mexico.
Yeah, that's oh man, you're also touching on the Washington DC flyover.
Yeah, that one
because
too.
that's a part of that as well. But I believe officially what would come out is that Roswell's official explanation. Ooh, I didn't do a lot on Roswell here because Roswell's too much. It's its own thing that I would have to dedicate an episode of UFO Disinfo to Roswell.
Interesting.
But
okay.
It's I believe that it's supposed to be Project Mogul, which was this balloon that they were using for, I think, information gathering. But what makes the whole Roswell thing fucking insane and confusing, and the reason it ended up getting all the attention that it would later get, is the team that like put out a statement about the supposedly downed saucer, which they originally put out this report on about a downed I'm forgetting the exact terminology, but they put out like basically a flying disc downed is the official report. And that same team that put that report out is the same team that would then, it was a bombing team that it was the same bombing team that helped drop the bombs on Japan in 1945.
Damn. Okay.
There's a whole, I mean, I can't get into it, but there is a whole side of Roswell that we could talk about sometime. And we haven't covered Roswell, the incident.
No, we've scraped across it in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
But we haven't done just like a straight up, here's the Roswell crash story.
Yeah. There's just these weird connections with Roswell that are just like, why did this elite squadron of bomb droppers, why were they the ones who put out this statement about a downed circular craft, and then they would like retract the statement? And at the time, the public like accepted the retraction because UFOs were not this big crazy thing quite yet.
Yeah.
Arnold was just 2 weeks prior to this event, and at the time, it was just not a huge media craze. So
yeah, things moved a bit slower back then.
Yeah. So we'll get to that someday. I have to return to disinfo for various UFO stuff. But
look, it's good that you found a new place that you can milk for the next 2 years,
yes.
you know? Because
I have so many things that we have covered on this show that are going to come up. So we'll get there. So we also talked about during the Arnold episode, the editor of a magazine called Amazing Stories. This is Ray Palmer, who again is his own interesting guy. But he was interested in the UFO stuff that was going on in 1947. So only a few days after Kenneth Arnold saw these saucers and it got reported on him, Palmer receives a letter. And this is a letter from Harold Dahl.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll remember Harold Dahl was this patrolman in Washington State's Puget Sound. When he's out, he sends this letter saying that he's out on his boat when there is a UFO overhead. There are UFOs, and they're these sort of balloonish looking UFOs near Maury Island. This is the Maury Island incident.
Yeah.
And he says that there are these there were these 6 crafts, and 5 of them were circling the 6th craft. And there's this debris that comes from one of the UFOs, and it crashes around him. It supposedly not only, I think the exact words we use is it destroyed one of his dogs.
Yes, I do remember this.
But supposedly also hit his son in the arm.
Which we didn't care about nearly as much, if I remember correctly.
What I remember, so when I went back and listened to it, the son appears many states away. When they find him, they say he disappears.
Yeah.
He appears states away, and he's just like waiting tables somewhere, like miles and miles and miles from there, claiming to not remember what has happened.
Right. Yes. Okay. I'm remembering this now. It was a season 3 Buffy scenario where
yes.
all of a sudden she's waiting tables in like somewhere in New Mexico or some shit.
Yes. Super weird.
Yep.
But I guess after Dahl kind of went and told his superior about what had happened, a man in a black suit visited him. And this is, again, one of the first accounts of a man in black. And this person basically was like, don't spread this story. Don't talk about this, or else something bad is going to happen.
Yeah.
But instead of obeying those orders from this random man in black, Dahl writes to Palmer, and he includes in the letter to Palmer a piece of the metal that supposedly came from this UFO. So then Palmer reaches out to Kenneth Arnold because he's like kind of the guy with UFO sightings right now, because it's 1947 and he's the big name that's attached to that at the moment.
Yeah.
Plus, he's also familiar with Washington State because that's around the area where he had seen the original UFOs. And he basically says to him, hey, $200, come and investigate this shit around Maury Island. Come see if you can help me figure out what's going on. Now, what's interesting is Arnold had also been visited by, and I'll see if you remember all this, Arnold was also visited by some government guys after the original sighting. These were agents Brown and Davidson, who claimed to be representatives of the Army Air Force Intelligence. And they had asked him about his original sighting, the UFOs around Mount Rainier. And they also talked to him about the Maury Island incident that he had been asked to investigate.
Mm-hmm.
So Arnold's curious now about what's going on, and he flies out to check it out. When he speaks with Dahl, the guy who originally wrote to Palmer and sent the piece of the UFO, apparently Arnold thought Dahl was kind of a stupid man. He did not leave a good impression.
Okay.
And
right.
he looks at the he also looks at the metal that had been supposedly recovered from this like UFO, and he just concludes that it's like lava rock. It's nothing special.
Okay, so it's not actually even metal. It's just
not metal.
Straight up from. Okay.
Yeah. And so he's like
it's really funny to think about someone like sending a piece of like sending a rock through the mail.
Yeah.
And being like, look at this alien metal, and it's just like, no, this is just fucking like generic rock that you were near a volcano, dude.
I don't really know like what the details there are, but it almost reads like he found a substance that would like be strange. It's like, oh, this super lightweight metal. And it's like, I've seen this shit before. I use it to like cut down on my calluses. Like I rub this shit on my foot.
Hey, I got bunions for days.
Yeah, like I use pumice on my, who do you think you're fooling?
Got a pumice stone in here somewhere.
But Arnold ends up meeting with Dahl's quote unquote superior. The patrolman's superior. This is a man named Fred Chrisman. And I guess Chrisman was a much more compelling figure, much more convincing. This is like all despite the fact that I guess Dahl was the one who had seen everything. Chrisman had not seen anything. It was Dahl had gone to Chrisman to be like, hey, I saw this UFO fucking shatter pieces all over and kill my dog.
And it like warped my son to some diner in Georgia.
That's another very strange detail to this. I guess Chrisman's very confident, and he talks with Arnold, and he suggests to Arnold that none of these crafts could have possibly been made in the United States. And because
they don't have the little sticker on
right?
them.
Yeah, they don't have the US. Yeah, they don't have the stamp of approval. He suggests that they actually could be developed, aircraft that had been developed from captured Nazi technology.
Yeah. Like the timeline of all of these things happening around that time period makes it's definitely compelling.
Yes. And I think it's maybe almost suggesting that the Soviets had reconstituted Nazi technology to breach United States airspace was the idea that he was that's sort of coming across here.
Well, you don't think they were just trying to take that one like Brazilian town that now just is like, oh, we're just German for no reason.
Yes.
Like I saw a screen cap of like a TikTok that was like, we found this random Brazilian town that has the second largest Oktoberfest, and someone posted on Twitter with like, no one tell her.
Seen that. That's really funny. Oh my god. Here's a couple other fun details about Arnold's visit to Puget Sound and investigating Maury Island. His hotel that he was staying at while investigating had been arranged for him anonymously. And this is after a journalist had called him saying that there had been some sort of tip about his saucer investigation, and that also led to Arnold thinking that the room that he was staying in, this anonymously arranged hotel room, was bugged.
Here's the thing, like no negativity towards Kenneth Arnold,
sure,
or anyone involved here, but if I were going to investigate a UFO case after already being talked to by some government officials, I wouldn't take an anonymous hotel room.
Yeah. Well, and the other part of this too is if you want to even try and be even more rational about this and like try and Kenneth Arnold's a bit credulous. He's just, there is a sense with him that he's pretty willing to buy into the more paranoid version of events. Because like the article's kind of, the things that I was reading were kind of pointing out that, like, is it really that strange that somebody had just arranged for a hotel room for him
Yeah, I
to
guess.
come investigate this thing?
I guess the reason my brain went that way is because it was posited as an anonymous hotel, like anonymously booked hotel room, as opposed to just a hotel room was arranged for him, as in he didn't book it for himself, which is probably
Sure.
what actually happened.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe that was a bit.
It's
bit
just
much.
a question of, like, are Arnold's version of events a bit more paranoid? Like, is it totally accurate?
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
he was already kind of like buying into this stuff. Also, he did try to call the Air Force intelligence contact, Agent Brown. And I guess that when he initially called, he was first refused. And Brown said, basically, I'm going to call you back, but I'm going to do so from a payphone.
Okay.
So when he contacts Brown, he says that Brown is going to be flying out with the other agent, Davidson, to help investigate Maury Island. And Arnold would then get another phone call from another journalist saying that they had received a tip about an Air Force investigation. So Arnold ends up, like, checking his room for bugs to see if there's something going on here. He doesn't find anything. But he begins to become suspicious of Brown and Davidson, thinking that maybe they had been leaking information about this Maury Island incident and his investigation into it to the press.
The government agents were leaking it to the press?
That's what he's thinking.
Okay. Just making sure I understood.
Now, here is the confusing question that comes up with a lot of this disinfo stuff.
Why?
Why did they do this? Because it's almost like, if they did this.
Yeah. If I did it, this is how I would have done it by O.J. Simpson, you know?
Yes. Well, it's like, why do you want a UFO excitement in the news? Is that a thing that you want?
Yeah.
What makes this even stranger is that when they actually show up, when these agents actually show up, if you remember, they pretty quickly decide that this whole thing was a hoax that Dahl and Chrisman had created.
Right. Yep.
And they end up taking these downed UFO samples, whatever they were, quote unquote, these rocks, and end up getting onto a helicopter, a military plane, to head back to California with the samples. The plane crashes and kills both men.
I had forgotten about that. Okay, yes. So now the evidence is forever gone.
The evidence is gone. These two men are gone.
Mm-hmm.
Their crash and ultimately their deaths happened on August 1st, 1947, the day that the Air Force becomes a separate branch of the U.S. Armed Forces.
Interesting. Man, one of my favorite things in all of conspiracy is the, like, I found this a lot when reading the Mars book that I did for the Patreon, where there are these
Hoagland.
Yeah, Hoagland and Barrow was the book. If you want to hear all about Deep Missions, Secret History of NASA by Mike Barrow and Richard Hoagland, donate to our Patreon. It is like the whole thing of, like, significance of, like, coincidence and like ritual significance in that case was what it was. But, like, the whole idea of these things having to happen on these, like, at the same time, so that's significant. And so, like, when these, like, basically their plane crashing on the day that the Air Force separated from the military is, like, it doesn't actually mean anything, but it sounds
really weird. So here's the thing that I maybe should have said up front, but, like, the UFO disinfo conspiracy is still a conspiracy.
Yes.
Like, it's not, there is a lot of gesturing at things that are like, that's a weird combination of things happening. Is there a connection here? But what's fascinating to me about it is, like, if there is some truth to the disinfo stuff, and I think that some of it there is, it is by design that it is difficult to make connections and for the waters to be so muddy that it's hard to understand what's going on.
Government's been trolling you longer than the internet existed.
This is the world's greatest troll, basically. So
I'm just imagining like a super serious conspiracy documentary. Today we uncover the government's greatest troll.
yeah, we can't.
And it's just like photos of like Egyptian statues and like 9/11 and fucking
Yeah.
like troll face stuff put over it.
Yeah, I
Ugh.
got a big troll face that kind of fades out over 9/11 footage.
Yeah.
It's really crazy stuff. So Kenneth Arnold is now like, oh my God, were Brown and Davidson killed for their involvement with the Maury Island investigation? And this is when another Air Force guy shows up. This is Major George Sander. And he basically takes Arnold out to an industrial smelting site near Maury Island and shows him that there are piles of rocks identical to the ones that Dahl had put out as these UFO debris.
Yeah.
And kind of just trying to, pat Arnold on the back and be like, look, it's all just a hoax. They've made it all up.
Yeah.
So this is again where you have to take what Kenneth Arnold says as fact. Kenneth Arnold is now super freaked out by all the weird stuff going on. He apparently goes back to Dahl's house to speak with him, and supposedly comes back to find it completely empty, just deserted. There is no furniture left. He says, quote, there wasn't a stick of furniture inside. That is direct words of Kenneth Arnold.
Okay.
So he leaves pretty much right after that. He's now very freaked out by all this, and he only stops to refuel once. When he leaves after the refueling, by the way, Kenneth Arnold is a pilot. He flies. This is how he saw the initial UFOs.
It took me a minute to be like, why aren't you just saying he got gas?
Yeah,
like,
sorry.
What is going on?
He flies a plane.
Okay.
And I guess supposedly when he was taking off after this refueling, his engine fails. And he has to take an emergency landing that I guess fucks up his landing gear. And supposedly, again, according to him, when he starts to kind of look into it and try and figure out why his engine had failed, his fuel valve had been cut. And he was thinking that it was intended that he also die in an accidental crash, just like Agents Brown and Davidson. Government assassination.
By way of plane crash. Okay.
Yeah, sabotage.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. If we have, I guess this might have been before we had the like heart attack guns and the stuff that they supposedly have now that people like conspiracy theorists will really go on about. You know about these things? Yeah.
Yeah. It's it's crazy. So we're kind of left with, well, why, if the government killed these men, and also staged this Maury Island hoax thing, why
why would you do
why
all
would
that?
they do that?
That's so many steps. That's actually really funny.
The explanation is pretty wild.
Is it because they thought Kenneth Arnold was like starting to get somewhere, so they had to kill him?
Well, I think that is the explanation that the diehard UFO people will tell you is like, we think that he was getting too close to alien stuff. But the other explanation that is sort of brought up in the disinfo, like government cover-up version of things that doesn't include the ET hypothesis necessarily, is that Mirage Men suggests that Brown and Davidson were Soviet spies.
Oh, okay.
So, I guess that there had been actual, like precursors to this. There were actual like something called this counterintelligence project called Verona. They had discovered they had decrypted some 3,000 messages that confirmed, I guess, the existence of Soviet moles at every level of the United States government.
Okay.
So there was, I guess, reason to believe that the government had been compromised heavily. Again, they're decoding this stuff, but like, I don't know enough about this project, but it's like, it also kind of brings up this question of like, well, was that legitimate data?
Yeah.
How legitimate is that?
Is that Russian misinformation?
Right, exactly. Because
Yeah. How
that's
deep
kind
does
of
it go?
it's a huge part of the Cold War is like this
Oh yeah.
this information back and forth, and so sure, there is this idea that Soviet moles had infiltrated the United States government.
Yeah, and one of them was Christopher from The Sopranos.
Yeah, Christopher Moltisanti from The Sopranos is a mole.
That was a Project Blue. Go watch Project Blue Book if you haven't.
Oh my god,
was,
that's right. He is in that.
Yeah.
Holy shit, I forgot.
The two like best episodes of the series are the ones that he's
him.
the
Oh my
ones with
God.
him.
That's so funny.
That one with him just doing the interrogation is maybe the best that show ever got.
You're absolutely right. Which is an all right show, but you're right. That is
Perfectly enjoyable show. But the best part of it was the episodes with him.
Yeah. So people kind of point out that the case for them being Soviet spies, so they didn't want to talk to Arnold on anything but these payphones.
Right.
So they were,
because they didn't actually have government offices,
Right.
or couldn't. Yeah. Okay.
and the idea is also that Maury Island, this incident had been a hoax, but it was a honeypot. Basically trying to lure.
It's so sexy.
Yeah.
It's too sexy for UFO enthusiasts to not bite on it.
Well, I think it's just like, I think what it's kind of suggesting is that a Soviet mole would want to find out about whatever secret U.S. technology is being developed.
Yeah.
And that an incident like this could be an attempt to cover up that kind of information.
Yeah, it is like it's a mole hunt thing. They're
Right.
putting it out there so that whoever the mole is will go and try to like get the claim on it, and yeah.
Another thing that gets brought up to try and sort of confirm this, or at least give it some semblance of evidence, is the background check of Dahl's superior, Fred Chrisman. Formerly flew with the Army Air Force in the Pacific Theater, and apparently wasn't the superior of Harold Dahl at all.
Oh, okay.
I guess it was rumored, not confirmed, but rumored that Chrisman had also worked within the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, which that would become the CIA.
Yes. So he was a company man that was brought in to like set up the honeypot. And that would be why he's the more convincing one. That's why, like, yeah. Okay.
And this other guy is his like little stooge setup guy.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right.
Yeah. So
I knew Chrisman sounded fake.
well, I think his name's real. But well, maybe. I don't know. And there would be other connections to the intelligence world of the United States with this guy. His connections would also lead to him being named by the district attorney, Jim Garrison, at the time, citing Chrisman as possibly being involved in the assassination of JFK. This is not a thing that we can
Holy shit.
actually, you know, we don't know that, but it is a suggestion being made.
Wow. All right. I guess I have to add that to my list of like JFK
Now,
experience
again,
stuff to look into.
You look at all of this, and it could literally just be as simple as it seems. These two guys were hoaxers, and there was a terrible accident with these two agents who,
Yeah.
for whatever reason, took off with the sample, maybe to, I don't know, save face about the investigation being investigating into a hoax, you know, like, I don't know.
Kenneth Arnold is lax with his airplane maintenance.
Yeah.
You know, that's
It's-
just
yeah.
things happen.
And maybe embellished on this story a bit. Who knows?
Yeah,
It's hard to say.
Yeah. Things go wrong in planes. That's why they're great for assassinations, because like stuff just happens and you can't do anything about it.
It's true, unfortunately. So jump forward a month later. A General Nathan Twining writes up this internal Air Force memo about the flying saucer phenomenon, about UFOs, calling it, quote, real and not visionary, which...
It's a weird choice of words.
Yes, especially weird because we're also fresh off of Roswell, where they basically have a retraction stating no UFOs, everything's fine, it was a downed balloon.
Yeah, visionary is a strange way of saying that.
Real and not visionary, which I think they're just saying that it's not like a visual hallucination,
Yeah,
maybe.
like I understand what they mean by it. It just is a very strange way of saying it.
Yeah. He also notes, quote, a lack of physical evidence in the shape of
maybe I'm just used to from the visionary mind of Zack
Yeah,
Snyder.
well, yeah,
I think I'm just like used to that connotation, and so it threw me off.
That's fair. He also notes, quote, a lack of physical evidence in the shape of crashed recovered exhibits. And he kind of puts out two theories to explain what's going on here. He says that either the flying saucers were top secret American projects that the now fresh Air Force was being kept in the dark about, or that they were some sort of advanced technology that was coming in from another nation. So those are the two theories that he's running with. Not even like bringing up extraterrestrial visitation.
Like both of those seem perfect. Like, look, I know Project Blue Book, the show wasn't like was not 100% fucking historical, but the idea that like the Air Force having just split off would have some like there'd be some weird politicking going on in regards to technology,
yes.
I think is 100% possible.
One of the things that's funny too about all that is the Air Force squabbling with other organizations, other military, and like the CIA and stuff. That's legitimate. That like Project Blue Book depicts that in a dramatic way, but there were like these, we'll get to it eventually.
Are the Air Force the little rascals of like the fucking, I don't mean like the movie, I just mean like in terms of vibe, they're just like, everyone just kind of gets annoyed with them and they keep just like doing stuff whenever they want.
Well, we'll get to it. But the short version of that is the Navy, the Air Force argued that the Navy was obsolete and that all war would be fought from the skies from then on. And the Navy was like, we don't want to be taken apart and dismantled.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Oh my God. There's no way. This is so fun. This is so fucking, there's so much here.
Yeah, this is going to be like a month and a half of episodes. Get ready, folks. Maybe we'll take a break in the middle and watch a documentary.
Yeah, we could do something like that.
Yeah.
So there's also, this is not a new thing also that like Nazis had basically had their technology reverse engineered by other nations, in particular in Soviet Russia, and that they were being used to do all kinds of things because that would, you know, we've covered the Nazi
go to the
projects.
moon, travel in time,
yes.
You know, just fly rockets and stuff. Like it really runs the gamut.
Yeah, basically take Hitler to Shambhala.
Yeah,
things like that. There's all kinds of stuff, but basically it's just that like the Soviets had access to all this like technology and there was a lot of experimentation going on with the Nazis and their technology, and then that's just a fact. So but it is this like fear that I guess is a part of the reason they launched Project Sign, which their Project Sign's existence is to investigate the UFO phenomenon, try and figure out what's going on with flying saucers. And this is, of course, based out of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And they're also kind of thinking like maybe we can obtain some of this technology for the United States, because right there on the base is the Air Technical Intelligence Center, which is also the location where the United States was doing their own reverse engineering of Nazi stuff.
Yeah.
So
it all tracks. Like and it is interesting how like far ahead of everyone the Nazis got in terms of like aircraft for a little bit there, and then as soon as the war was over, everyone was like, "Gimme!"
Yeah, everybody's trying to salvage that stuff.
Yep.
So the following year, after Project Sign is established, they also end up releasing a report called Estimate of the Situation, and it's very
that's a really matter of fact. That's very great.
It's also funny because like I don't know if we have the actual report. Like I don't know if we actually have the information in that report because it kind of is referred to almost as like rumors of what was in there. because the rumor that it seems to sort of play into the hands of ufology, it's that basically these saucer sightings domestically did not match reports of any German craft that they were aware of.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that I'll take that about as far as I can throw it, but it works.
People imply that their conclusion on the sightings is meant to say that the craft could be non-terrestrial technology.
Yeah. I mean, like that's the kind of stuff that you can find out there that it really does make you think, oh, the government would rather you think this stuff is aliens than think that some other global power has a better technology than we do.
Yeah. Apparently, the reason that we don't know about the report made by Project Sign is because supposedly what was written in there pissed off the Air Force Chief of Staff so much that he had all copies of it destroyed.
That's fantastic. Like, I would be so curious to know what pissed this man. Like, did he take like a turn in the middle of the document and start like attacking this guy's wife or something? Like, did he start like, I don't know. I was about to start saying like describing like the yaw of his dick or something in the middle of the briefing.
Yeah, they halfway through the report, they're like, all right, enough of this UFO shit. I want to talk about the Air Force Chief of Staff.
The Air Force Chief of Staff has tiny balls.
Tiny balls, weird penis. There's nothing normal going on down there.
Long and cursed twice.
Yeah, those. And have you ever had like a bag of frozen peas? Well, report we got from his wife is that that's what it feels like.
This is what was in the government document.
Yeah. No, I don't know. We don't really know what happened there. And I don't know how true any of that is. That's just a part of the story as far as I'm concerned. So this is also where we get the idea of flying saucer panic in the late 40s, allowing the Air Force, this is, I think, brought up in the show Project Blue Book, allowing the Air Force to kind of argue for not only their necessity, but like increased budget. Because they're protecting the United States skies, right? So then that kind of leads to this year of these constant, these like sightings, right? And it's believed that these sightings, the argument here is that these sightings are of our own aircraft, and the U.S. Air Force doesn't want people talking about it. And this is where we see the Air Force, the dynamic with UFOs begin to change over time here, because they eventually, again, I think Project Blue Book kind of shows this, the show, they are kind of now wanting to disassociate themselves from the UFO phenomenon over time. And it's, I think, partly because of the extraterrestrial hypothesis that has supposedly come out of the Project Sign report, but also just was now becoming a thing in the UFO community. And so this is when Project Sign sort of transmogrifies into Project Grudge.
Okay.
And this is where it takes a turn for the de facto opinion. The official opinion should be that flying saucers are not real. We are going to debunk all of this. And it's more of a public relations thing where they want to convince the world, hey, flying saucers are bullshit. None of this is real.
It's really funny that you name that project Grudge, because it comes off like it undercuts the entire message of this thing. It's like,
well, I don't think it's public at this point,
right? But like, even in they had to have known that this stuff would get declassified eventually.
Yeah, no, well, maybe, I don't know. I don't know what they were thinking exactly. It's a little hard to know.
They were just thinking the American public was stupid and they could do whatever they want, I think.
Well, they end up basically getting an article.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe what?
So maybe they were right.
Maybe. Who knows? But they end up getting this article published in the Saturday Evening Post that just lays out the explanations for why UFO extraterrestrial stuff is nonsense. They basically say it's vertigo, it's balloons, reflection of light on clouds, aircraft canopies. There's no UFO encounter at this point that we can't explain in a very rational way.
Yeah.
And they're just kind of trying to just lay it all to rest here. No more UFO nonsense.
And the best place to do that is one article in a paper.
I guess so. I mean,
I get that's at that time that was a way to get information out there, and especially it would then probably get picked up by other places. Like,
yeah.
I get that actually is a reasonable thing for them to do. It's just really funny to think like, how do we get this out there how do we get this out to the world? How do we get everyone to stop thinking that aliens exist? I got it.
I know of one newspaper that'll be just tops.
Yeah, this will be great. We got to make sure we get it above the fold, though, because otherwise people get bored and stop reading. It needs to be on, like, you know, in the first section or two above the fold, and you're good to go.
Do you really think that people back then actually got bored of reading the newspaper when they didn't have, like, TikTok?
Yeah, fair. I mean,
when they were still playing hoop and stick, which, as far as I'm concerned, was a huge deal up until the 90s when the internet
basically
happened.
lasted until the Game Boy. The history of child entertainment goes hoop and stick, then Game Boy, and then
basically.
everything else starts out from there.
Yeah.
Your Tamagotchis, all this kind of shit.
Now, to probably the chagrin of the Air Force, in December of 1949, in one of the more popular magazines for men, called True.
Okay, I was about to say Playboy, but sure.
No. This magazine, True, it features an article by a guy named Donald Kehoe.
And I guess Playboy wouldn't have been around in like the fucking 40s.
No, this is 49.
Back then, you got your like your skin mags. You got like, I don't know.
Did they have sexy magazines back then?
Maybe it was just like the fucking peep shows and stuff at that point. I don't know.
Maybe.
There's absolutely no reason why we would ever do a history of pornography episode, but it'd probably be pretty interesting.
It wasn't until the use of the word gams dropped out of popular conversation that it was permissible to start putting out sexy Playboy type magazines. I have no idea when Playboy.
I don't know.
60s? It
sounds
like a 60s.
Yeah, it
like
seems
late
like a 60s
thing,
idea.
Right?
Yeah.
I have no idea. So this article's titled "Flying Saucers Are Real," and this is where Kehoe kind of just says that, hey, the flying saucer phenomenon's real and they're aliens, and the government doesn't want you to know about it. Now Kehoe had been a Pulp Fiction writer, but he's also a former Marine aviator, and he kind of. He basically stakes his claims on that he had basically come to this conclusion about the UFOs after interviewing a bunch of officials who had also ended up just stonewalling his investigation.
Okay.
Also a guy who I have run across a number of times.
Yeah, the name sounds very familiar.
So then Commander Robert McLaughlin, who is the officer in charge of the naval unit at White Sands Proving Ground in Alamogordo, he pens the follow-up for True Magazine, talking about a sighting by 5 Navy scientists while they were watching a weather balloon. And these articles run counter to the Air Force's the Air Force's attempt to lay things to rest in the Saturday Evening Post. And now that article is looking like part of the cover-up.
Okay. The article, okay, I'm with you. Yes. So they're basically just like, oh shit, our one article didn't work. These guys are posting about in like men's magazines about the UFO phenomenon, how it's aliens.
Yes. Well, and remember, Commander Robert McLaughlin who is a part of a naval unit.
Yeah.
This is a story counter to the Air Force's attempt to run a certain narrative. So Mark Pilkington kind of points out that in 1949, the Navy and the Air Force are pissed at each other.
That's awesome. Oh my God.
And they're fucking fighting over this stuff.
They're fighting in the fucking tabloids about aliens. This rules.
Mom and Dad are fighting. It's crazy.
And what about the third? What about the second mom? The Army. What are they up to? Do they have any opinion on the matter?
I don't know if I get into the Army specifically. It was more about the Navy and the Air Force getting shitty with each other.
The National Guard only has an opinion like once or twice a year for like a weekend, I think. And then, anyway.
Yeah. So the new Secretary of State, who was a proponent of the Air Force, he cancels a supercarrier project that was for the Navy, and he then signs off on an Air Force bomber project. And that is when things just like hit the fucking fan between these two groups.
Oh my God. Do these guys, I hope these guys punch each other.
The Navy command structure leaks evidence that the Air Force generals had dealt fraudulently with certain military contractors when they were building these bombers. They leak it.
This is just... This rules. This is like, oh man, the fucking petty assholes in our military are really wonderful.
It was they got so shitty with each other that a House Armed Services Committee hearing had to be formed and discussed so that they just could stop them from fighting each other like this.
Yeah, like because this level of like official shouldn't be doing this stuff when they are like, I don't know, in charge of expensive and lethal machinery.
Yeah.
To like all over the like this could get bad.
Yeah.
If these people keep fucking up,
leaking classified info.
Yeah.
So it's really just like, where are they going to go with this if it escalates?
Like on one hand, it's dangerous and shitty. On the other hand, it kind of rules.
It is kind of hilarious. I mean, I'm not in really support of either unit.
No, fuck
but
them.
it is really amazing to me that this is what was happening.
Yeah.
So all of this is to suggest that.
Do you think that the modern military would like, you know how the military will like loan out stuff for Hollywood movies? Do you think they would be willing to do that for a movie about the Army and the Navy like at war with each other?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I really don't. This is like not a history of, although I guess in Project Blue Book, they do kind of show that there is tension between different governmental or military organizations in the U.S.
Yeah.
So maybe they're a little open.
Yeah, but if you set the entire narrative of the story around like making both sides look kind of like assholes, it probably wouldn't go very well.
You can do it if at the very end, a group of Navy officers and a group of Air Force officers all get together and have a dance party.
Yeah, there we go.
So this is all to kind of say that maybe what's happening is the U.S. Air Force pushes to try and put the kibosh on the UFO story and these theories that are popping up. And the Navy literally does shit to fuck with that and try and be like, oh yeah, no, UFOs are happening, definitely. The Air Force is fucking lying to you.
Oh, that rules. Okay.
So it's this like really early historical precedent in the history of UFOs for the manufacturing of a UFO narrative.
Yeah, because either way, one side is 100% lying.
Yes.
And so like I'm guessing both sides are leaving some shit out, but like this is straight up a conspiracy. Like a literal definition of the word, some sort of conspiracy is happening.
Now, again, I have to remind you that like cannot confirm that any of that is the case, but it's not on its face like totally implausible, but it's also not really verifiable either.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of foundation of all the disinformation stuff that comes forward, where we have different branches pushing and pulling against each other and the narrative getting pushed and pulled around. Sometimes they are simultaneously confirming and denying the existence of these things, and it becomes a fucking mess.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
And the thing about this that I think was most interesting is like I feel like if these things were actually real and happening and were like a big deal, this like push and pull wouldn't have been would have been squashed immediately.
yeah,
Like I feel like some big, I don't know, I don't know, the fucking deep state. Why not? Like
Sure.
somebody would just be like, this is bad. This is like a bad look and it's drawing too much attention. You guys got to go.
But you could also argue,
Yeah.
and this isn't. You could argue too that the chaos surrounding this information is beneficial. That chaos around things that they don't want the American public to know is in their favor because you can't put your finger on the true story.
True. Like I guess it is putting out a lot of mixed messages and leading to, if you're going with the entire like just sowing a bunch of disinformation stuff, then this works out pretty well.
Like I said, the reason this was so hard to navigate and like turn into an episode is there are a number of people who are exposed or have kind of come out, or it's been declassified that they were purposely acting as disinformation agents. But the things that they deny, they'll be like, yes, I was trying to do this, but then they'll just be like, oh, but like some of the things that this person learned about were true, definitely. And it's fucked. It is so fucked and so chaotic and so muddied that I think that's the goal, is the muddying of things, the chaos. That to me, regardless of what the truth is, and I don't think it's aliens, that's what the goal is
So I think
you can't figure it out.
In some ways that basically makes this a government funded podcast, a government supported podcast. Because
we are now shills.
We're just digging through all of their messy shit and all of the misinformation that's out there, and that's so honestly like hey, Biden, cut me a check and don't do any of that bullshit where you like where it's like, oh, it's a check for $1,400, but you already got $800, so it's only $600 this time. Like, don't do any of that shit. Just like a big old fucking check.
Yeah. Hey, look, if the government wants to pay us to continue to do what we're doing, I'm all for it. But unfortunately, the government has not been.
Don't get final cut.
Yeah,
I will not give out final cut.
Fair. That's valid. We can negotiate.
Yeah.
And here's another little story that is, I don't know, maybe it happened, maybe it didn't. But the story goes that in March 1950, it's the same month that True magazine puts out the flying saucer article. There is this mystery lecturer who is lecturing to science students at the University of Denver about the subject of flying saucers near Aztec, New Mexico, which is not very far from Roswell. And suggests that the military had found several dead aliens inside of downed saucers, and that they had been studying them and also recovered the craft.
Yeah, okay. I'm aware of this concept.
Yes. Now, the Denver Post, I guess, would later expose this lecturer as a man named Silas Newton, who I found FBI files on.
Wow.
This is a man in the oil game and noted con artist. And the investigation of this guy sort of shows that he had gotten this information from a Nazi sympathizer named Leo Gebauer, who I guess at one point had worked for Air Research Company in Phoenix, Arizona. And the Aztec story had, I guess, proven to be a hoax that had been published a few years earlier in the Aztec Independent Review. And Silas Newton, in his own journals, wrote that two men from a, quote, highly secret U.S. government entity had approached him and informed him that they knew that the story that he was pushing was a hoax, but they encouraged him to keep doing it.
So I guess, why did they contact him?
they basically say that they promise to protect him if
Oh,
anything were
okay.
to happen to him, but keep pushing this hoax bullshit story. And what makes this whole thing very strange is 2 years after all of this, Newton and Gebauer are convicted of fraud. And this is for, I guess, selling people mining gear. I remember reading he claimed to have some sort of device that could like detect, I think, oil, and he was trying to sell that. But it was like this mining gear that they had it is mining gear that they claim that they had reverse engineered from extraterrestrial technology.
Right. Okay. What was this guy's name again?
This is Newton, Silas Newton, who, again, notable like literally in the FBI files is referred to as a con artist.
Yeah, I was trying to remember. I did an episode like super fucking early about, like lizard people under San Francisco or something like that. It was like underneath Los Angeles. That's where it was. And there was a guy in the head of that also had like this mining thing that let him get down to these tunnels that had like the tablets. And I was trying to remember
yeah.
And I was trying to remember if there's any relation, but I don't think there is.
Well, the thought here is that so they get convicted of fraud and their sentences are suspended.
Oh, okay.
Meaning, did they call in a favor from the shadowy government agent that contacted them telling them to keep pushing this story and I will protect you?
And they said, we'll protect you for this story, not for you to do whatever. You don't have a fucking get out of jail free card, but I guess they
kind of do.
Yeah, that's
the idea.
Yeah.
Furthermore, Newton's lecture at the university had also ended with this questionnaire that was asking students how believable they had found this story. And there were also further reports of follow-up surveys that had been distributed among the students that had been conducted by Air Force intelligence.
So are we getting this from the misinformation from the other side here now that the Air Force is pushing this, like, these, which if you're going to put out a survey of this stuff, why do you put believable? How believable do you find this guy?
Yeah.
Because like, are they trying to cast? Are they going to like recast him if people don't find him believable?
I don't know. I just think what Mirage Men suggests is like, well, maybe they were trying to see how the public would react to these stories and what advantage they could make out of that.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Now, I'm going to cut it here.
Oh, yeah, fair.
We have so much more to talk about. It's insane. It's really insane how much more we need to talk about. But we're gonna do multiple parts of this one, and we're gonna keep chugging through this story because I have so much more, such sights to show you, Niall.
I'm excited. Like the whole misinformation thing it's such a complicated web because you're like in the circles that I look into, it's the mix of like who is a misinformation agent versus who is telling the truth. And a lot of times different people have different lists of who's and what.
Ufologists are also like really dramatic and petty.
Yeah.
As far as accusing people of these kinds of things. So it's all over the place. And
sometimes whole branches of the military fight against each other about whether or not aliens exist.
This is all also just kind of setting us up for the idea. What?
So if the Air Force is working with Tom DeLonge, who do you think the Navy is going to try to bring in? Like the guy from Papa Roach? Are we going to like what like pop punky frontman do you think they're going to try to bring in?
Blink-182 is reuniting.
Yeah, they put out a song called Edging.
Yeah, I listened to it.
And it kind of sucks.
Yeah, I'm not super into it.
But I haven't liked a Blink album in a long time, so I'm not the biggest target audience for it.
Yeah, I mean, they could be tapping into anybody, but maybe it'll be somebody out of like fucking left field.
Yeah.
Like maybe it'll be like Doja Cat.
That would be interesting.
Maybe they'll get Doja Cat on this.
They're going to have to fight WWE to get Doja Cat. I think they want to use to use her.
Oh God, dude, I can't wait to keep talking about this and for other people to like. I'm excited. I'm curious to hear how our listeners react to this one as well. But we're gonna continue into a further part 2, and see where we get. So, Niall, that brings me to this episode's big question, and I think this is a fun big question because it could pay off in a later episode in the series.
Okay.
Here. So Niall, if you could be a fly on the wall to any one UFO event in the history of ufology in the United States, to determine its validity in the canon as like whether it was a real event or a disinfo event, which one would you want to see and why? I know my exact answer. If you're cool with me, jumping in with mine, and maybe it'll help inspire yours.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to see the Hopkinsville Goblins encounter more than anything else. I want to know if they saw something weird that night, or if for some reason the government planted a bunch of fake gremlins on their property.
Yeah, that one would be really interesting to like. I think about that with some of the weirder cryptids and like aliens and stuff, where it's just like the one-offs, the one-off strikers. Like I would love to be a fly on the wall where the fucking pancake Italian aliens were
Yes.
like, just see what kind of stuff they were slinging.
I love that one. Yeah.
What was the ones that were like you did an episode on one and they were like hauling fruit in Italy or something?
Oh, that's the friendship case.
Yeah, the friendship. Yeah.
I forget what those guys were called, but that one's also, very weird and full of bizarre tidbits.
And maybe like a scam about alien produced fruit, which was wonderful.
But the Kelly Hopkinsville encounter is like so famous and also kind of early enough that like we haven't established the canon of like the different types of aliens that are visiting Earth. And so like there's some connection to maybe the descriptions of those like gremlin-like guys sort of eventually became the Greys.
Yeah.
And I don't know, but I would like to know once and for all what happened there, because
that
it's
one
so weird.
Would be really interesting. Just like it's such a. I mean, it was one of the first things we did for a reason. Like it's such a like big, interesting. Like there's a narrative to it, but we don't have like it's all from like one family who witnessed this thing. So like there's no second view of the entire situation. So having a little fly on the wall, that would be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I would like to know. What about you?
I would love this. This is maybe just because it gets referenced so much in a lot of like stuff comics and stuff that I read. I would love to witness the Tunguska event.
Oh, that's the big explosion, right?
Yes.
I covered that one.
You did
a long time ago.
It like Warren Ellis used it as an explanation for Galactus coming to Earth, and I thought that was really interesting.
That's
like
kind of fun.
There are things. It's such like a weird, because the whole thing is supposedly like UFO artifacts found, but it's such like this weird, just big explosion that scientifically people think it was an asteroid grazing the Earth, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But if it were like the UFO connotations to it, I think are really interesting.
Yeah.
So like from just like a personal curiosity. It's also like early 1900s, so it's way pre Roswell and like the canonization of aliens, like we talk about, where, like you said, the ones before we figured out what type of aliens people are used to hearing about and everything, when it was just the Wild West and people just saw weird shit and like didn't try to make it fit a narrative they know about. Mm-hmm. I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah, and like we do have in the 40s like the pulp science fiction like alien stories, but it doesn't become this like social phenomenon of visitation until later. So it is interesting when you go back and see something like the I believe Tunguska.
Is that how you say it?
I think I determined that it was pronounced that way. And you see that and it's like, well, of course they can now fit that into the alien hypothesis, if that's what you want to call it. So Oh my God.
Yeah,
I just
this
talked
is a big
lot.
one. Yeah, you
I
did.
talked a lot. And there's so much more to talk about. So look for the next couple weeks.
We'll figure out just how many parts this is going to be.
Yeah.
Based on how far we got this episode,
Yeah.
and we'll keep going on this.
Cool. Well, Niall, do you want to go ahead and take care of some business?
Yeah, let's go ahead. So if you want to follow us, you can follow us on Twitter at IGW Podcast.
You can follow us on Facebook.com/ItGetsWeirdPodcast.
And we're on all your favorite podcatchers, from Stitcher to Google Play to Apple Podcasts to Spotify. If you listen to podcasts somewhere, look up It Gets Weird, and we're probably there.
We've also got Twitch.tv/ItGetsWeird, where we're streaming usually every weekend. Life's busy, so sometimes we have to miss a weekend, but I usually stream with Colin, and then occasionally we've played like party games and stuff in the past, which
we're probably due for another one of those pretty soon.
We'll do that with people again. And the way you find out about that is either following us on Twitch or being a member of our Discord through our Patreon. So email us at itgetsweirdpodcast@gmail.com. Also, we've been a little starved for emails recently, so
hungry.
Hit us up. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We have a $2 tier and a $5 tier. At this point, at the $2 tier, we have just started watching The X-Files Season 1 as voted by our listeners and donors to the Patreon, and talking about it for It Gets Weird TV, which is the show that you get at $2. At the $5 tier, I'm sorry.
Sometimes I feel like you try to make this the most circuitous way around explaining the things.
I
just like to pop yourself.
It's
I think
because I'm conspiracy brained after researching all this shit.
Yeah.
At the $5 tier, you get access to It Gets Weird TV plus another bonus show on the off weeks of It Gets Weird TV. So you're getting bonus content every single week. Sometimes it's a show I do. Sometimes it's a show Niall does. Sometimes we watch a movie. We do all kinds of stuff. Whether you donate to the $2 tier or the $5 tier, you get access to our mainline show 2 days early on Friday instead of Sunday. You also get access to our Discord where you can chat with us. You also get access to voting for It Gets Weird TV. We also have a $1 tier where it's just a tip. You don't get anything out of it. You're just saying, hey, I like your show. I like what you do. Here's $1. If you can't donate to us, please tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your congressman all about It Gets Weird podcast.
I'm gonna start timing you doing that and
see how
you can.
I'm gonna
see
get
what your
faster
personal
and
best
faster.
is. Yeah. Eventually, it's gonna be like a
speedrun it.
fucking auctioneer going off. Yeah. Maybe that'll make our episodes back to the original planned 45 minutes that we made like 6 years ago and never stuck to.
We're never going back, I don't think.
All right. Thank you all for listening. Shouts out to anyone that has shared this with a friend. Keep telling all your weird friends about It Gets Weird. We love to have new listeners. We love people that are like, anytime someone in our Discord or on Twitter or wherever is just like, oh yeah, I just found out of your podcast. I'm on like episode 120, and it
blows my mind. Yeah.
I lose. It's great. It still is wonderful, and I love it. So thank you all for listening to the show. Keep telling your friends, tell your enemies, tell your congressman all about It Gets Weird. I've been Niall,
and I'm Kyle signing out.
Peace.